I've already talked to Rolf Potts and I've spoken to Travis Sherry, and I'm going to say the same thing to you that I did when I spoke to these guys. When I started planning my traveling life, I was looking for books and podcasts and YouTube channels, and one of the podcasts that I came about was yours, Alexa, and it's called Break Into Travel Writing, and I thought, oh my god, I'm gonna learn so much. So I binge list a lot of your episodes, and yesterday we were at a meetup here at TravelCon, and across the table you were, and you said, I'm Alexa, and I do Break Into Travel Writing. It's so funny to finally meet you, because I feel like I know you already.
It's great to meet you, and I think that is a funny thing about the podcasting world and the whole social media world. You feel like you get to know people online or through audio, right? And then you meet them, and it's like you have known them.
I do this podcast, the Radio Vagabond, where I document my journey around the world and put out an episode every Monday. But it's almost become a tradition that I also put out an episode on Fridays with interviews. This is where I meet some inspiring people in the travel industry, nomads or YouTubers, travel bloggers or travel podcasters, people that inspire me to do what I do. And hopefully these conversations will inspire you too. And today is no exception. Here I meet the host of the Break Into Travel Writing podcast. And now I'm going to say something that will make your Amazon smart speaker respond. Alexa, why did you start the podcast?
I started the podcast really because I had a yearning to teach. I started as a freelance writer. I then moved into blogging, and for me, a lot of it was a learning curve because I started back in like 2007, and there wasn't a lot out there as far as blogging went. There were travel writing courses and journalism courses and things like that, so I felt like I learned a lot of it on my own, just kind of figuring it out. And so at one point I wrote out what I thought might be an ebook at one point, and I was actually at another conference in the Philippines with Chris Ducker, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and podcasting was huge, and a lot of the guys that were there were podcasters, and I was telling them about what I wanted to do, and they said, well, basically there are 3 platforms. You can either be a writer, a speaker, or a podcaster. Like, you have to have one if you want to have a platform. And I'm not much of a public speaker. I am a writer, but I've tried writing long-form books, and they just never seem to get finished. So podcasting seemed to be the most interesting choice for me, and it really boiled down to wanting to share what I had learned.
Why aren't you a public speaker? Because you can speak.
Oh, thank you. Fear, if I'm being honest. I've always had a bit of a fear. Public speaking class in college was...
When people can see you.
Oh, only when they can see me, yeah. I can do panels,
okay.
But getting up, and I think it's a terrifying thought for me. So Toastmasters is on my to-do list.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best prices on hotels and guest houses and hostels around the world. Hotels25.com, best price guaranteed. Alexa Meisler gives out a lot of tips in her podcast about how to succeed as a travel writer. But she also does episodes where she just shares stories from her own travel life.
I think I do a little bit of both. I enjoy sharing the trips that I take. I talk about the tourism people that I work with. I talk about how I go about arranging a trip that is a do-it-yourself versus maybe working with a tourism board. And I mix those in with other podcasts where I talk to experts. It might be tourism, it might be other bloggers, but just about things that will hopefully help us all out. And to be quite honest, a lot of the times the people that I choose to interview, it's a lot because I want to know about the subject myself. So yeah, so it's
that's actually really why we're here,
isn't it?
But you run a course as well.
I do. I have a travel academy, and it's a month-by-month course. There's no big contract or anything like that, but it's really for people who want to jumpstart their travel blogging career, and we do monthly Google Hangouts, and I've got a whole load of course material. I do learning tutorials every single month. We've got a Facebook group. We do a yearly mastermind. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
How do you feel the travel blogging industry has changed over the last 5 years?
It's changed so much. When I first started my website, if you added one photo, you were good. And social media was barely there. So I think one of the biggest things for me is just the amount of social media that you need to incorporate into your blogging. So it's not just sharing it out, right? It's you have to think of that as part of what you're offering to brands or tourism if you're working with them. And the amount of visual storytelling has changed just dramatically. The amount of photos that are now in a blog post, I spend as much time editing photos as I do writing, which was never the case before.
You also have another project, 52 Perfect Days.
Yeah, so that's my travel blog. That's the website that's been around since 2007, and I really started it because when I was freelancing, I was really discouraged working with editors who I would find a media trip. Let's say I was going to go on a trip somewhere. I applied for it, I got the yes, but then I had to get the editor's approval, and that process was daunting at times as far as like coordinating dates. So you get the yes for the trip only if you can get the letter from the editor saying that you can take the trip. So I didn't like missing trips, so I started my own website and became my own editor and publisher.
Why the 52?
When I started this site, my son was little. He was like 4 or 5 years old, and in my head, what made a lot of sense to me was I could do one trip a week. I could write about one adventure that I could take with my family, and so it was going to be 52 articles every year, and yeah, so that was my idea. It made a whole bunch of sense to me at the time, but it's become a good talking point because everyone wants to know why 52. It doesn't really make a lot of sense because there's 52 weeks, not 52 days, but it was 52 days that I was going to be able to tell stories about.
Yeah. You're based in San Diego, but how much do you travel?
On average, about once a month. I'm breaking that this month.
Okay. Is it alone or always with your son?
It's a combination. I do love traveling with my son. We did a big road trip.
How old is he now?
16.
Yeah.
And he writes the Kids Corner for my site. So he writes about why places are cool for kids and fun for families. And so that was kind of an agreement when he got old enough that for a long time it was just a vacation for him. And having him actually write about it and maybe take some photos, it just made him understand a little bit more about what I'm actually doing, that this is a job and it's not just a vacation.
Yeah. So is traveling a full-time job for you?
Traveling isn't. I'm not nomadic, but travel blogging, the podcast, yeah, full-time, that's all I do.
And the academy.
And my academy. Thank you.
This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
So that was what's happened in the last 5 years. Where do you see the whole thing going?
So monetizing is really important. If you are doing this full-time, it's really important that I think tourism and PR understand the amount of work that we're putting into this, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a travel blog, whatever your platform is, even if you're only really an Instagrammer, the amount of work that goes into research and time on location, all the photos, all the social media, it's a lot of work. So if you're in a location for 3 days, working full time to discover and learn about that place, and then you go home, you now have 3 days that you weren't working on anything else. So you get home, you start working on all of this information that you've gathered from being there, and it's time consuming. It is work, and I look at it as a trade. and that it is a work relationship.
For people listening to this that want to break into travel writing, what are the top advices you can give them?
The number one thing I would tell somebody to do is to write for another blog. So if you want to be a journalist, then go get some clips and try to maybe write for some big online publications or even print magazines. If you want to get into blogging, find other blogs that accept guest writers, and it's just a really good way to see if you actually like this or not, because there is a lot that goes into it, and every website, if you're interested, they will usually have either submission or writer's guidelines somewhere in the footer or in their header. So I would do that, and I would do at least 10. And there's two reasons.
So you mean before actually launching your own blog?
Before launching your own blog, you want to see if you actually like the process of writing. You want to see if you like the process of having to also edit photos. You just really want to know if this is a lifestyle that you enjoy, and are you good at writing? Is it enjoyable? Because if it's not enjoyable, if it's a struggle, you're not going to probably make it long term as a blogger. And the other really great thing I think about going this route is you can actually play with a couple different niche ideas, or maybe you think you're an adventure blogger, but you actually find that writing about food is more interesting. I started out writing primarily about spas, thinking, that's the coolest thing in the world. I'm just going to go get a whole bunch of massages and facials and all these treatments. But I really quickly found out that it's hard to respin that story. Like, writing about a massage, I can only, there's only so many words. So I quickly realized I really enjoy other types of travel. I love talking about wine and culture and food, and so it really helped me know what I enjoy writing about. So know that before you start your blog.
And I can take anything you can throw at me, and nothing can get me down. Life is looking so bright, the sun is up again. I'm feeling like I could fly. No clouds in my way, no.
I'm talking to Alexa Meisler at the very first TravelCon conference in Austin. This event is arranged by another travel blogger, probably the biggest of them all, Nomadic Matt Kepnes. I asked Alexis why she decided to come.
A couple reasons. There was, when Matt first announced this, there was a little bit of a frenzy in the blogging world about, being there. And so he did a really smart thing, which is when he was selling his tickets, he offered money-back guarantee up into 30 days before the event. So I thought, well, what do I have to lose? I'll book the ticket, and then I'll figure out whether I really want to come or not. I'm here. And I also am here because there was an initial promise that there was going to be some higher level learning and the opportunity to meet with people about monetizing and sponsorships and things like that. So for me, it seemed like a super good opportunity to take my blog and my podcast and hopefully bring it to the next level, which is becoming a bigger earner, right? It goes back to monetization. If you're doing this full time, you need to make a living.
If you like this podcast, please subscribe in iTunes or the podcast app on your smartphone. You can see pictures, watch videos, and read much more on the Radiovagabond.com. Pale can be reached for interviews and public speaking gigs on mail at Radiovagabond.com.
Before I let you go, I'm thinking, do you have one of those Amazon smart speakers?
No, but I can tell you, my sister-in-law does.
Let me just explain for the people who don't know, your name is Alexa, and that is not a common name. And when you have this device, all Americans know this, but some of my listeners outside of the US may not know this. When you say Alexa and ask a question, question, it answers. So if I were to have that, I could say, Alexa, what's the weather going to be like? And the machine would answer.
Right.
That would be a problem for you having that in your house?
Oh my God, it would be far too confusing. But my sister-in-law does have one, and it was the first time I had visited anyone with one. And it's the way, because you are asking a question, every time she would say something, it would be like, Alexa. And so it's to get the device's attention, and every single time I turned around and said, what? So it was not fun. It became a little bit of a joke. So
nice finally meeting you, Alexa.
I know. It's wonderful to meet you in person.
Thank you. Go to the Radiovagabond.com for links to Alexa's sites, and make sure that you subscribe to her Break Into Travel Writing podcast. And of course, also stay subscribed to this podcast. I have so much good stuff coming your way in my regular podcast series that you get every Monday. Here you can be a fly on the wall as I travel to every country in the world. Right now we're in the US, but soon I'll take you to Africa. My name is Palle Bo. See ya.